That video is government evidence from the January 6th insurrection, where a Texas man, Guy Reffitt, was pepper sprayed while trying to breach the Capitol. Reffitt was convicted earlier this year on domestic terrorism charges and is due to be sentenced in D.C. District Court today. And that's where we find NBC News justice, intelligence, and correspondent Ken Dilanian, who joins us now. So what could he face for what he did? And what are some of the further consequences of these for all these people who participated in this day?
Good morning, Mika. Well, prosecutors are asking the judge to sentence Guy Reffitt to 15 years in prison, which would be 3 times as long as the longest sentence handed out so far in these January 6th cases. And those 5-year sentences were against people who were convicted of assaulting police officers. Reffitt was not convicted of assaulting an officer, nor did he enter the Capitol. But there were other aspects of his conduct that were so serious that prosecutors have decided to bring the first ever terrorism enhancement. They're asking the judge to use this terrorism enhancement on his sentence, which would add about a year to his sentence. And what that means is that they are saying that his conduct was designed to influence the government through coercion or intimidation. Now, you might think, weren't there hundreds of people that day who fit that bill? Well, this is the first time the Justice Department is actually making that argument in court, and it's because Guy Reffitt's case was particularly serious. He came to the Capitol with a holstered handgun. He is accused of urging the rioters on and being a key figure in breaching the west side of the Capitol. And then he was later convicted of trying to of essentially threatening his children, who were talking about turning him into the FBI. He said that they were traitors and traitors get shot. His teenage son actually testified against him at trial. And interestingly, that teenager said that he called the FBI with a tip before January 6th about his dad's troubling conduct, but the FBI never reached out to him until after January 6th. But this is an important case in many respects. Guy Reffitt did not plead guilty. He went to trial, and the government is arguing he never accepted responsibility. He wasn't remorseful even after he was convicted. He did send a letter to the judge saying he was ashamed of his conduct. And, you know, his story is really one of he's an oil rig worker who lost his job, got sucked into the orbit of the big lie, his family says, and became obsessed and was a member of a far-right group called the Texas 3 Percenters. And he came to the Capitol. He also had an assault rifle. He didn't bring that to the Capitol, but he came to Washington with a rifle. And prosecutors really seek to make an example of Guy Reffitt today, Mika.
So Ken, what do the numbers look like as far as the number of convictions, the number of trials that are still out there? It does seem day in and day out that the Justice Department is rolling up a good number of these people and making them face justice for trying to breach the Capitol and cause harm.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I mean, this is the biggest or widest ranging investigation. That's how the DOJ in Justice Department history. And there's been more than 850 arrests. But, Joe, the thing is that they now believe that as many as 2,500 people entered the Capitol. And so they're trying to charge all those people, and they haven't identified many of them. And so we have some reporting at NBC News that this investigation has become so sprawling that it's actually logistically difficult for the Justice Department to handle, and the FBI. They're straining at the seams a little bit to keep track of all this evidence and all these defendants. At the same time, as you know, they're also branching out into an investigation that looks at the conduct of people around the former president and maybe former President Trump himself, and that's going to require the attention of the top people at the Justice Department. So this is a huge investigation. They have gotten serious prison time against a couple of dozen defendants, and there will be many more like that. But they also have a big hurdle in front of them to identify some of these people who, and they have the help, by the way, of citizen sleuths who are using facial recognition to find people that the FBI have not been able to find on their own, guys.
NBC's Ken Dilanian, thank you very much.